At the age of just 20, Sarah was a young woman trying to navigate life while carrying a heavy burden on her shoulders. At the age of 18, she gave birth to a young child, Tommy. She has been left to raise the child alone, though, as Tommy's father has left her life. However, like all the boyfriends Sarah had in the past, his father had passed away. She was always left alone, but she is a young and beautiful girl and continually looking for love. Each time she believed she had found someone, they would eventually go on. But her son Tommy was the constant culprit. Therefore, Sarah was unable to spend time with any of her boyfriends since the baby was inconsolable. Eventually, they were all fed up and moved on, leaving Sarah by herself once more. But still, every time Sarah tries to establish a new relationship, it ends badly, which makes her feel extremely alone. She hopes to find someone who will stick with her and is always searching for love and connection. However, things always end the same way when she finds a new boyfriend. They break up with her. And the reasons behind the breakup are always the same, and it's because of her baby, Tommy, every time. She spends her time with her boyfriends but is interrupted by his frequent tears. Because of this, Sarah's boyfriends irritated and eventually gave up on her, leaving her by herself once more, having grown weary of her incessant crying and her need to give Tommy so much attention. But Sarah is a mother of a little child, so she has to take care of him and frequently finds herself sitting with Tommy in her arms while feeling helpless in her tiny flat. Her life has changed, and she can't help but think about it. She just dreamed of huge ambitions when she was younger. She visualized herself taking trips, spending time with friends, and relishing her youth. Nevertheless, she is confined to her house and must care for a kid rather than pursue her aspirations. Despite her love for her son, Sarah finds motherhood extremely challenging at such a young age. She is becoming exhausted due to the weighty obligation of caring for someone else. She believes that because she became a mother at such a young age, she lost out on significant life experiences. She finds it difficult to deal with the sense that she should be living her own life, but is now solely in charge of someone else's. Then, after a few times, Sarah stumbled upon a new guy one day. His name was Jake. He seemed different from all the other guys she had dated, besides being older and charming. Their relationship was getting strong, but this time Sarah found herself withholding a significant secret from Jake, Tommy, because he didn't ask many questions about her life. Also, she was aware of the consequences. She chose not to notify Jake about her son. Just as everyone else did, he would abandon her. She finally forgot to bring up Tommy. Sarah was stuck between her need for independence and her obligations as a mother as their relationship became increasingly serious. Tommy was always in the way and in need of something, which prevented her from being with Jake. Jake began to discuss taking a solo vacation with his girlfriend. He wished to take Sarah to a beach resort located remote from the metropolis for a full week. She was excited at the thought, but her excitement dissipated the moment she glanced at Tommy. How would she handle him? For days, Sarah struggled with the concept. She couldn't miss this chance. Jake presented her with the opportunity to live the life she had always imagined and to find happiness. However, Tommy was present. She doesn't want to say no to Jake because she feels like her dreams are coming true. She took a few days to think about this. Although she was worried because of her baby, she didn't want to take him with her. It was almost as though she didn't have the strong relationship that a mother ought to have. She saw Tommy as an obstacle, a constant source of frustration, who always came between her and her happiness. Moreover, she didn't trust her neighbors enough to leave him with them. On top of that, she didn't have any family close by. That's when she had the thought. Sarah persuaded herself that it would be all right even if it wasn't the best idea. Tommy would stay at home with her. She could leave him ample food and milk for several days, even though he was still a baby of 3 years and had access to his crib. It was just a week long. She would return before any negative events transpired. It wasn't as though she would always leave him behind. She assured herself it would only be a week. Feeling no shame, Sarah promised herself that she would come back before something terrible occurred. Tommy was merely an obstruction. This was all about her, after all, and she had no serious concerns. This was just one time. It wasn't like she would abandon him every time, merely a week. However, when the travel day finally arrived, Sarah prepared her bags. Tommy was sound asleep in his cradle, breathing in and out of his tiny chest. Sarah gave him one more look and felt her heart accelerate. She ignored the guilt that was eating at her. She had the opportunity to be free now. She put some toys nearby, filled bottles with milk, and discreetly shut the door. After Jake picked Sarah up, they set out on their journey. The road spread out in front of them. The sun was bright, and Sarah had an odd mix of joy and nervousness. She made an effort to ignore Tommy. She didn't want anything to spoil her trip so she could enjoy herself. When they got to the beach resort, Sarah felt really free for the first time in a long time. After a few days, Sarah nearly came to believe that everything at home was all right. Jake didn't seem to know anything about Tommy from Sarah, and she hadn't told him anything either. Their days were spent laughing late into the night, sipping cocktails and relaxing by the pool. However, Sarah's mind kept returning to Tommy during the quiet times when Jake wasn't present. She questioned whether he was all right, whether there was enough milk, and whether he was crying. However, she dismissed those thoughts after that. This was her chance to get away. Tommy would be right. Then Sarah received a call halfway through the journey. The elderly woman who lived next door, Mrs. Dawson, was her neighbor. As Sarah heard Mrs. Dawson's voice on the other end, her heart fell. "Sarah, I heard screaming coming from your apartment. It has continued for several days. Is everything going well?" When I knocked on the door, nobody picked up. Sarah's hands started to tremble. It was not her intention for anyone to notice. She swiftly told Mrs. Dawson a falsehood, saying Tommy was with a relative and everything was good. But panic was beginning to creep in. She still had 3 days remaining on her vacation. Could Tommy hold out that long on his own? She felt like the rest of the journey was a blur. She was no longer able to enjoy Jake's company or the stunning beaches. She saw Tommy's face and heard his cries each time she closed her eyes. Therefore, she made an effort to convince herself that he was okay, but the guilt was overwhelming. Sarah couldn't wait to go home when the trip eventually came to an end. While driving her back, Jake exclaimed about how wonderful the trip had been and suggested that they go again soon. Sarah, though, hardly heard him. Fear was running through her mind. When she opened her apartment door, what would she find? Sarah made a mad dash for her apartment after they got there. Her hands were shaking so much that she was fiddling with the keys. She was assaulted by the fragrance as soon as the door opened. She would never forget the smell, a combination of sour milk, used diapers, and something else. Something more detrimental. While running to Tommy's crib, Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. Her stomach turned to see what was staring at her. Tommy's little body was cold as he lay there motionless and silent. The milk bottles were scattered all over the floor, untouched. Too long had he been left alone. Sarah's screaming was heard by Mrs. Dawson, who then called the police. Police officers, social workers, and astonished neighbors' features were all blurred in the aftermath. In addition, when Jake learned about Tommy, he was shocked because he had stayed behind during the mayhem. He couldn't believe what Sarah had done and glared at her. Like all the others, he left her life without saying a thing. Moreover, after Sarah was taken into custody for maltreatment, the news soon spread. The young mother who abandoned her infant to die while on vacation made headlines. While sitting in her prison cell, Sarah kept going over what had happened in her head. She had given up the most significant aspect of her life because she had been so thirsty for freedom and love. Sarah's life that she had so desperately desired was gone, along with Tommy. But Sarah felt oddly at peace, rather than overcome with regret. She felt no guilt, contrary to what one may have thought. To be honest, she felt a strange sort of comfort from the circumstances. No more cries from the baby interfering with her enjoyment. No more breakups due to Tommy's actions. She was free to live her life now, free from the weight that had kept her back for so long. It wasn't that she felt lost at all, but rather freed, inside the impersonal, icy prison walls. She believed this was her chance to live the life she had always desired because Tommy was no longer a barrier. At last she could feel content, even if it was behind bars.